A studio contract guaranteed glamour, but for stars like James Dean and Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's spotlight masked relentless pressure and, in some cases, lethal consequences. Dean's crash and Monroe's overdose are more than lost legends. They are evidence of a system that prized image over survival. How did these icons become tragedies? And why did the warnings go unheeded? Their stories set the stage for Hollywood's most haunting pattern. James Dean's rise was fast and unforgettable. In less than 2 years, he went from unknown to the face of a new generation, starring in East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. The studios packaged him as the ultimate rebel, but away from the cameras, he chased real adrenaline. Dean's passion for racing was no secret. He competed at Palm Springs and Santa Barbara, and his letters spoke of the freedom he found on the track. Warner Brothers promoted his moody, thrill-seeking image, yet there is no evidence they ever tried to curb his dangerous hobby. No contracts, no insurance memos, no studio warnings. Just a young star behind the wheel of a Porsche 550 Spider, heading to Salinas for another race. On September 30th, 1955, Dean set out with mechanic Rolf Wutherick. That afternoon, he was ticketed for speeding, 65 in a 55 zone, just hours before the crash. Near Cholame, California, at the junction of Route 46 and Route 41, a Ford Tudor turned across his lane. The impact was nearly head-on. Dean, just 24, died instantly from a broken neck. Wutherick survived with serious injuries. The inquest ruled the death accidental, noting the other driver's unsafe turn. Dean had finished filming Giant, but never completed his dialogue looping. Future roles, still under contract, vanished overnight. Warner Brothers and his estate froze his image in time, and publicity photos, re-released films, and merchandise all reinforced the legend of an artist who would remain forever young. Dean's story became the template for a myth, the star who burns bright, takes risks, and leaves behind a world that never gets to see what comes next. That pattern continues to echo through Hollywood history. Marilyn Monroe's ascent began in wartime factories and Hollywood casting offices, but by her mid-30s, she was the most recognizable face in the world. Studio contracts dictated everything: her hair color, her diet, even her bedtime. The public image was flawless: red lips, white dresses, effortless laughter. Behind closed doors, Monroe's life was governed by a carousel of doctors and prescriptions. Insomnia and anxiety became constants. By 1962, she was under the care of multiple physicians, each prescribing barbiturates and sedatives, Nembutal, chloral hydrate, and others, often without coordination. Studio memos from Fox cataloged her missed days on set for Something's Got to Give, citing illness, but privately blaming instability and over-medication. When Fox suspended her in June, the official line was health problems. Internally, executives debated whether she was insurable at all. On the night of August 4th, 1962, Monroe retreated to her Brentwood home. The following morning, she was found dead at age 36. The coroner's report listed acute barbiturate poisoning with levels far above therapeutic range and noted a history of prior overdoses and depression. The official ruling was probable suicide. No evidence of forced entry, no note, just a bedroom littered with pill bottles from different doctors. Press stories highlighted heartbreak and exhaustion. Decades later, the facts remain: overlapping prescriptions, fragmented medical oversight, and a system more invested in keeping its star working than in keeping her well. Monroe's death became a cultural myth, but the records point to a tragedy shaped not just by fame, but by the failures of those entrusted with her care. In August 8, 1969, Sharon Tate was just 26, celebrated for her roles in films like Valley of the Dolls and The Wrecking Crew. She was 8.5 months pregnant, living with director Roman Polanski at a rented home on Cello Drive. Late on the night, 4 followers of Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian arrived at the property. Watson climbed a telephone pole and cut the line, leaving the house isolated. The group avoided the main gate, scaling a brushy embankment to slip undetected onto the grounds. There was no professional security, no alarm system, just a gate and the assumption that fame and privacy meant safety. Inside, Tate was spending the evening with friends, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski. The housekeeper had left hours earlier. The intruders confronted Stephen Parent, a visitor in the guest house, and shot him before forcing their way into the main residence. Over the next hour, the Manson followers bound and attacked the occupants. Sharon Tate pleaded for the life of her unborn child, but the killers showed no mercy. By dawn on August 9, 1969, all 5 victims were dead. Tate had been stabbed 16 times. The word pig was scrawled in her blood on the front door. The brutality of the murders sent shockwaves through Hollywood. For an industry accustomed to publicity scandals and private heartbreak, the Cello Drive killings shattered any illusion of security. In the months that followed, celebrities rushed to install gates, alarms, and hire guards. The message was clear. Fame offered no protection against random violence. Sharon Tate's death was not just a personal tragedy, it was a public reckoning for Hollywood's sense of invulnerability. Natalie Wood's final hours unfolded aboard the yacht Splendor, anchored off Catalina Island on November 28, 1981. She had spent the evening with her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain Dennis Dekker. Accounts from that night remain tangled. Witnesses described a heated argument at a local restaurant, followed by rising tension back on the yacht. Sometime after midnight, Wood vanished. The next morning, at 7:44 on November 29, 1981, her body was found floating in a cove with a dinghy beached nearby. She was 43 years old. The original investigation, led by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, concluded quickly. The coroner's report cited accidental drowning, noting bruises likely caused by efforts to climb into the dinghy. No evidence of foul play was found, and the case was closed in just 2 weeks. Yet questions never faded. Bruises on Wood's arms and face, a scratch on her neck, and conflicting statements from those aboard the yacht fueled decades of speculation. Captain DeVern's later accounts, contradicting his initial statements, suggested a more violent argument and raised doubts about how swiftly Wagner responded when Wood was discovered missing. In 2011, the case was reopened, drawing on new witness reports and a fresh review of the evidence. The following year, 2012, the coroner amended Wood's death certificate, changing the cause from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The amendment cited unexplained injuries and uncertainty about how she entered the water. In 2018, Robert Wagner was named a person of interest, as investigators noted inconsistencies in his statements. No charges have ever been filed. The official record now acknowledges what the public sensed all along. The full story of Natalie Wood's death remains unresolved, suspended between accident and unanswered questions. River Phoenix arrived at the Viper Room on the night of October 30th, 1993, slipping into the thrum of West Hollywood's club scene. He was 23, already celebrated for roles in films like Stand By Me and My Own Private Idaho. Inside the club, the atmosphere was permissive, drinks flowed, and in the VIP corners, drugs changed hands with little concern. By midnight, Phoenix had ingested a mix of cocaine and morphine, a combination that would prove lethal. Witnesses later described him as unsteady and anxious, moving between the bar and the sidewalk. Just after 1 in the morning, he collapsed outside on Sunset Boulevard. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but the damage was irreversible. The coroner's report listed acute, multiple drug intoxication, with toxicology revealing high levels of cocaine and morphine, traces of marijuana, and Valium. Hollywood's party culture offered easy access and few boundaries, leaving young stars like Phoenix with little real protection. His death was not just a personal loss, but a warning to an industry that too often looked away. Brandon Lee arrived on the set of The Crow in March 1993, ready to take on his first major leading role. At 28, he was poised to step out from his father's shadow. On March 31st, during a late-night shoot in Wilmington, North Carolina, a scene called for Lee's character to be shot. The revolver in use was supposed to fire blanks. Instead, a lead slug from a dummy round left lodged in the barrel during an earlier setup was propelled into his abdomen when a blank was fired. Emergency surgery failed to save him. Investigators traced the tragedy to a chain of preventable errors. OSHA cited the production for serious safety violations. In the aftermath, SAGAFTRA and IATSE rewrote safety bulletins, banning live ammunition on sets, mandating licensed armorers, and requiring barrel inspections before every shot. Brandon Lee's death forced Hollywood to codify the rules that now protect everyone on set. The spotlight still burns hottest on the young. Today, social media multiplies the pressure and erases every boundary between fame and privacy. These tragedies are not just Hollywood's past. They warn us what happens when myth demands more than any human can survive. What price for a legend?
Why was a famous actor found tied up with lipstick messages? Why did a rising star leap from the Hollywood sign just days before getting cast? And why was one legend only identified by her jewelry? These aren't rumors, they're facts on file. Carole Lombard, confirmed by a ring. On January 16, 1942, Carole Lombard boarded TWA Flight 3 after wrapping up a successful war bond rally. She was coming home a national hero, but she never made it. The plane crashed into a Nevada mountainside near Las Vegas, killing all 22 people on board. The official cause of death on her certificate was multiple traumatic injuries. But what wasn't printed was how badly the wreck shattered everything. Investigators reported that the impact and resulting fire made identifying victims nearly impossible. Lombard's body was so badly damaged she couldn't be identified by sight. There were no fingerprints available, no recognizable features left. The only thing that told officials who she was? Her wedding ring, engraved with her name and that of her husband, Clark Gable. The site itself was a nightmare. Wreckage was scattered across rough terrain. Recovery crews had to hike up steep slopes in freezing temperatures. One rescue worker later recalled it as one of the hardest retrievals he'd ever done. Personal items were melted or destroyed. The remains were so severely damaged that identification was only possible through personal items. Clark Gable rushed to Nevada as soon as he heard. When he arrived, officials handed him Carole's ring. That's when it became real. He stayed near the crash site for days, helping however he could. Witnesses said he looked completely hollowed out. Her body was eventually returned to Los Angeles for burial, but the press avoided the full details. They called it a hero's farewell and skipped the horror behind it. But her death certificate quietly confirmed what couldn't be shown in the papers. Carole Lombard had raised over $2 million in war bonds just days before she died. Her passing shook the nation, but what stayed with many wasn't just the loss, it was how little was left. Her name lived on, but in the end it was a simple piece of jewelry that proved who she was. The ring said everything. Albert Dekker, found in bizarre scene. He was no stranger to playing villains on screen, but nothing in his career prepared the public for the strange way his life ended in May of 1968. When he didn't show up for a dinner party, his fiancée let herself into his Hollywood apartment and found a scene that's still talked about today. His death certificate listed the cause as an accidental event tied to private circumstances, but that tidy phrasing didn't capture the full story or the questions it left behind. Dekker, 62, was found in the bathroom. He was found in a compromised position with restraints and markings that raised concern. Authorities described it as an accidental private incident. The most unsettling detail? Investigators noted unusual lipstick markings and minor physical signs that raised additional questions. Police found no evidence of foul play, no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. His fiancée told investigators that he'd engaged in risky behavior before, and detectives ultimately concluded it was a private act gone wrong. But many in Hollywood didn't buy it. Friends questioned the lipstick markings, saying they didn't sound like something Dekker would have done to himself. Others noted that certain valuables, like a camera and cash, were missing, even though the apartment looked undisturbed. Some speculated that someone else had been there and quietly cleaned up before leaving. Dekker's career had slowed down in his later years, but he'd stayed active in both acting and politics. He'd served in the California State Assembly and had a reputation for being sharp, outspoken, and professional. The idea that his life ended in a tragic accident involving restraints and lipstick stunned everyone who knew him. To this day, many still wonder whether the full story ever came out. But the coroner didn't change the ruling, and the press kept the details quiet, reporting it as an unusual death under private circumstances. His certificate may have closed the case, but the unanswered questions? They're still hanging in the background. Gig Young. No warning, no note. On October 19, 1978, the front desk clerk at the Manhattan Plaza apartment complex made a disturbing discovery. Inside one of the units, actor Gig Young and his new wife, Kim Schmidt, were found lifeless. The official documents were straightforward. His certificate cited a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Hers listed a fatal injury caused by another. But what those papers didn't show was how sudden, silent, and unexplained it all felt. Young had just married Kim 3 weeks earlier. She was a rising star, just 31. He was 64, an Oscar winner, and still trying to revive his career. The apartment had no signs of forced entry. There was no struggle, but a revolver was found nearby. What rattled everyone was the lack of a goodbye. No note, no phone calls, no arguments overheard. Friends said they'd just seen him, and he'd been upbeat, optimistic about future projects. Some even said he was in love for the first time in years. Toxicology reports showed no drugs or alcohol in Kim's system. Gig had low levels of medication, nothing that indicated intoxication. The scene was neat, clinical, cold. Rumors followed fast. Some said Young had long battled depression but hid it well. Others pointed to his history with substance use. There were whispers about financial pressure, but the truth, no one really knew what pushed him over the edge, if anything did. The biggest question was, why Kim? Why her too? She was at the start of something. Her acting career was building. She had no reported health or mental health issues. Their relationship had no public problems, and yet they were both gone, quietly, without any signs. Lupe Velez. A plan gone wrong. She was known for her fiery spirit on screen. Off camera, she was just as bold. But in December 1944, her final hours didn't match the image she'd carefully crafted. Her death certificate cited complications related to sedative use, described as self-administered, but the story behind it didn't match the headlines. According to reports at the time, Velez had planned her exit with precision. She dressed in silk pajamas, arranged flowers on her nightstand, and prepared for a quiet passing in her bed. But when police arrived, they didn't find her in bed at all. They found her collapsed in the bathroom, nowhere near the careful setup she had intended. Whispers began fast. Some tabloids printed false claims about how she was found, going so far as to describe a scene that the LAPD denied ever occurred. The real details were troubling enough. There were signs that she had vomited shortly after taking the pills. Some believe the overdose didn't go as planned. Others wonder if she got up, panicked, and lost consciousness trying to find help. What made it even harder to understand was her recent mood. Friends said she'd seemed upbeat just days earlier. She was working. She had a steady romantic partner. But she had also recently learned she was pregnant and reportedly feared scandal and career fallout, especially during the conservative climate of the 1940s. Her final note, short and formal, simply wished well to those around her. There was no sign of anger or regret, just an eerie calm. The press at the time worked to smooth over the truth. They emphasized her beauty, her energy, her impact on film. But behind closed doors, those who knew her privately said she never wanted pity or shame, just control over her own image. That image cracked when the death scene didn't match the plan. The certificate offered a clinical summary, but the messy, unscripted ending was something she hadn't prepared for, and something no one could rewrite. Charles Boyer, a pact cut short. He had spent over 4 decades with his wife, British actress Pat Patterson. By Hollywood standards, it was a rare kind of loyalty. When Pat became seriously ill with cancer in 1978, Boyer stayed by her side constantly. On the surface, everything looked calm. But just 2 days after her passing, Charles followed her. His death certificate cited complications from sedative use, noted as intentional. There was no sign of struggle, no distress call. He simply didn't wake up. What quietly shocked those around him wasn't just the loss, but the timing. Close friends said Boyer and Pat had discussed a plan, a joint agreement to go together if her condition became too painful. But according to her doctors, Pat was not yet in the final stages. She still had time left. Which raised the question, did Boyer go early? Did grief take over before their plan was meant to begin? There was no note, no last words left behind, just a home suddenly silent. Boyer had wrapped up his career years earlier and lived a quiet, private life with Pat. He rarely made headlines. He had no major scandals. He was known as one of the industry's more refined, thoughtful stars. But in the end, he didn't want to outlive her. That much seemed clear. The press barely covered the details. The focus stayed on the love story, and it was, undeniably, a deep one. But that doesn't erase the confusion. Did he believe Pat would want him to leave when he did? Or was he simply unable to picture even one more day without her? The medical report confirmed the method and dose. The circumstances were marked as intentional. But the story between those lines is quieter and harder to explain. It's a chapter about love, timing, and a decision that came too soon. Peg Entwistle, a role too late. In 1932, the 24-year-old stage actress, facing deep frustration over her stalled film career, was later found near the base of the H in the Hollywoodland sign. Her death certificate cited blunt force trauma and identified her through a purse left at the scene. But what makes her story truly haunting is what came after. A day later, a letter arrived at her uncle's house offering her a lead role in a new film. The timing was surreal. The role was exactly what she had wanted, proof that things were finally turning around. But Peg never saw it. The opportunity came too late by just 1 day. Entwistle had moved to Los Angeles from New York, where she'd built a solid theater reputation. She landed a role in the RKO film 13 Women, but much of her performance was cut in editing. The disappointment hit her hard. In the days leading up to her death, friends said she seemed withdrawn but never dramatic. The night she disappeared, she left a brief note saying she was tired and had failed. The words were short, sharp, and final. The public response was a mix of sympathy and fascination. For years, tabloids added their own spin, inventing dialogue or inserting emotion where there had been none. But the truth was already plenty heavy. Peg Entwistle didn't leave behind chaos or scandal. Just a quiet, devastating message, and a letter that proved the thing she wanted most was still within reach. The tragedy wasn't just what happened, but how close she came to something better. Her certificate recorded only the physical outcome, but the emotional aftermath echoed far beyond that hillside. And for a town obsessed with timing, Peg's story became the reminder no one wanted. Sometimes the break really does come 1 day too late. Paul Bern, a studio-curated scene. On September 5, 1932, MGM producer Paul Bern was found lifeless in his home, just 2 months after marrying rising star Jean Harlow. The official report said he had taken his own life. A short note was found nearby, and his death certificate listed the cause as a self-inflicted incident involving a firearm. But the details around the scene quickly raised flags, even inside the studio. For starters, his body was reportedly found upright, with little blood on the carpet. Police noted that the scene looked unusually clean for what had occurred. Studio executives were contacted before the police arrived. According to several sources, MGM representatives may have had time to adjust the scene before law enforcement saw it. This wasn't confirmed, but it stuck. Then there was the note itself. It read more like a cryptic apology. "You understand that last night was only a comedy." No one knew what that meant. Was it about an argument with Harlow? A private issue? The note didn't explain the decision, it just hinted at something unresolved. Theories exploded. Some pointed to Dorothy Kilgallen, Bern's former partner, who had a history of mental health issues and was known to have reconnected with him just days before. 2 days after Bern was found, she disappeared from a riverboat and was later found drowned. Jean Harlow never commented publicly on the incident, and MGM kept her away from reporters. The studio's main focus was protecting her rising image, and Bern's death became just another Hollywood mystery buried beneath headlines and cleaned-up quotes. The certificate closed the case as self-inflicted, with no further investigation. But the strange positioning of the body, the vague wording of the note, and the quick involvement of MGM's crisis team left a trail of doubts that never fully disappeared. Dorothy Kilgallen, a case gone cold. She was a journalist, a television personality, and one of the few people to interview Jack Ruby, the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald. She was sharp, connected, and curious. But in 1965, she was found unresponsive in her Manhattan townhouse, dressed for public appearances, lying in a bed she rarely used. Her death certificate listed the cause as complications from alcohol and sedative interaction. The details raised quiet concerns almost immediately. For one, she was fully dressed, complete with false eyelashes, something her friends said she never did unless she was headed out or expecting company. Second, she was found in a guest bedroom, not her usual space. There was no sign of a note, no spilled pills, no alcohol bottle in view. She had recently told friends she was working on something big. Some say it was a book about the JFK assassination. Others believe she had obtained sealed testimony from the Warren Commission. Either way, those notes disappeared after her death. Her toxicology report indicated the presence of alcohol, along with 2 prescription sedatives. Not an overdose level on their own, but together, enough to stop her breathing. Still, no glass or drink was found nearby, and her last public appearance was smooth, even cheerful. At the time, the medical examiner labeled it an accidental mix, but those close to her didn't agree. In later years, journalists tried to reopen the conversation. The inconsistencies in her death scene, the missing documents, and the sensitive work she was reportedly pursuing made people wonder, was this really an accident? Or had someone stepped in to make sure her final story never made it to print? William Desmond Taylor, Hollywood's first scandal. In February 1922, director William Desmond Taylor was found lifeless in his Los Angeles bungalow. His certificate listed the cause as a fatal gunshot wound to the back. But the scene told a much more tangled story, one that would become Hollywood's first true crime obsession. Police arrived after Taylor's valet reported finding him unconscious. But the delay between discovering the body and calling authorities raised eyebrows. Even stranger, the scene looked staged. Taylor's body had been positioned as if peacefully sleeping. A cigarette had been placed just so. No sign of a robbery, even though valuables were clearly visible. That calm setup didn't match what had happened. Investigators found a single bullet wound, with no defensive injuries or signs of a struggle. No weapon was recovered, and multiple fingerprints, none of them useful, were smudged throughout the bungalow. It felt like someone had cleaned up fast. What turned this from a strange death into a headline grabber was the list of people linked to Taylor. Actresses Mabel Normand and Mary Miles Minter were both closely connected to him, personally and professionally. Minter's love letters to Taylor were leaked to the press, sparking scandal. Normand had reportedly been the last to see him alive. Rumors of secret relationships, love triangles, and jealous rivals swirled. Then came the studio's reaction. Paramount executives worked behind the scenes to protect reputations, especially those of their rising stars. Some witnesses weren't questioned. Some leads went cold. Eventually, the case stalled completely. The coroner marked it as a homicide, but no charges were ever filed. Jean Harlow, decline overlooked too long. She was just 26 when she died in 1937. Her certificate listed the cause as uremic poisoning brought on by kidney failure. But what's disturbing is how long her symptoms were ignored, and how preventable her passing might have been with earlier treatment. In the weeks leading up to her death, Harlow had complained of nausea, swelling, and fatigue. Her breath reportedly took on a strong ammonia-like smell, a classic sign of kidney trouble. On set, crew members noticed her slurring speech, losing balance, and appearing disoriented. At one point, she collapsed during filming. Still, she kept working, and she wasn't rushed to the hospital until it was too late. Her mother, a devout Christian Scientist, was deeply skeptical of traditional medicine. According to those close to the family, she discouraged hospital visits and delayed getting help. By the time doctors were called in, Harlow's kidneys had already begun to fail. Her body couldn't rid itself of toxins. When she was finally admitted, her condition spiraled fast. Doctors attempted treatment, but there wasn't much they could do. Within days, she slipped into a coma and passed away on June 7th. Her official time of death, 11:37 a.m. The press focused on her beauty and youth, calling her loss a shock to the industry. But those close to her knew the signs had been there. Medical experts later said that if she had received IV fluids and dialysis-like support earlier, she may have had a fighting chance. Her certificate named the cause clearly, but it didn't tell the full story. The delays, the symptoms, the family's resistance, all of it contributed to her decline. In the end, it wasn't just her illness that claimed her life. It was the silence, the waiting, and the belief that she didn't need help yet. And that quiet decision may have cost Hollywood one of its brightest stars far too soon. Bela Lugosi, Dracula's final costume. Bela Lugosi spent his career haunted by Dracula, so much so that when he died in 1956, he was buried wearing the infamous cape. But that wasn't the strangest part of his death. The actor's cause of death was listed as a heart attack, technically coronary occlusion, at the age of 73. By that time, Hollywood had long since moved on from him. His health had been declining for years, worsened by chronic pain and an addiction to morphine and methadone. He died nearly penniless in a modest Los Angeles apartment. Despite once being a major horror star, the Dracula legend hadn't been kind to him in his later years. The roles dried up. The money disappeared. By the time of his death, he was more of a Hollywood relic than a legend. But the real horror began after he was gone. Lugosi never publicly stated he wanted to be buried in his Dracula costume, yet when the funeral was arranged, that's exactly what happened. His son, Bela Lugosi Jr., later insisted this wasn't his father's wish. It was a decision made by his ex-wife, Lillian, along with actor Vincent Price. The intention was to honor his most famous role, but did Lugosi himself ever want to spend eternity trapped in the cape that defined and cursed his career? That part remains murky. Then there was the issue of the funeral itself. Lugosi had no money left. He died in near destitution, living off Social Security and occasional film work when he could get it. He didn't even have enough funds to pay for his own burial. That's when a fellow horror icon stepped in. Peter Lorre, along with Vincent Price, covered the funeral costs to give their friend a proper send-off. There's even a legend that Lorre, upon seeing Lugosi in the open casket wearing the cape, leaned over to Vincent Price and whispered, "Do you think we should drive a stake through his heart just to be safe?" Jayne Mansfield, The Car Wreck. June 29, 1967. A Buick Electra sped down a dark Louisiana highway, slicing through the humid night air. Inside sat Jayne Mansfield, her attorney and rumored boyfriend Sam Brody, their driver, and 3 children, including 3-year-old Mariska Hargitay, nestled in the back seat. The group was en route from Biloxi, Mississippi, where Mansfield had performed at a nightclub, heading toward New Orleans for her next booking. But at approximately 2:25 a.m., the trip ended in one of Hollywood's most infamous car crashes. The Buick was traveling at high speed when it slammed into the back of a tractor-trailer that had slowed for a mosquito fogging truck. The impact was instant and catastrophic. The top of the car crumpled as it slid under the truck, shearing off the windshield and part of the roof. The first reports were gruesome. Word spread that Mansfield had been decapitated. While that wasn't exactly true, the truth wasn't much better. Her official autopsy listed the cause of death as crushed skull with avulsion of cranium and brain. Put simply, the force of the crash had violently scalped her, exposing her skull. Brain matter was found on the car's dashboard. The coroner noted she suffered crushed skull with separation at the temporal region, meaning her head had taken the full brunt of the impact. Death was immediate. Her attorney, Brody, and the driver, Ronnie Harrison, also died on impact. Amazingly, Mansfield's 3 children survived, shielded by the front seat. Mariska Hargitay, who would later become famous for her role in Law and Order, SVU, was left with a facial scar but no memory of the accident. Thelma Todd, poisoned in her own garage. On the morning of December 16, 1935, Thelma Todd's maid found her slumped in the driver's seat of her Lincoln convertible, parked inside her garage in Pacific Palisades. The 29-year-old actress, best known for her comedic roles alongside the Marx Brothers, was dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. But the details of her final night didn't sit right with investigators or the public. The official cause of death? Accidental. The theory? She came home late from a party, too drunk to make it inside, and passed out in her car while the engine ran. But that explanation ignored several red flags. For starters, Todd's body didn't look like she had simply fallen asleep. She was still wearing her evening gown, makeup intact, and had fresh bruises on her throat. Blood was found on her lips and inside her mouth, suggesting she had suffered some kind of trauma before she died. Even stranger, her car keys weren't in the ignition. They were tucked inside her purse. If she had locked herself inside the garage, how did the keys end up there? Then there was the matter of her powerful enemies. Todd owned Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, a successful restaurant in Malibu. According to rumors, mobster Lucky Luciano pressured her to let him run an illegal gambling operation out of her restaurant. She refused. A few days later, she was dead. The night before she died, Todd attended a party at the Trocadero nightclub. She seemed in good spirits, even joking with friends about recent death threats she had received. She left the club around 2 a.m., reportedly driven home by her chauffeur, but instead of entering her house, she somehow ended up in the garage of her ex-husband, Pat DiCicco, a known mob associate, where she died. The autopsy confirmed carbon monoxide poisoning but found no alcohol in her system, contradicting the theory that she had passed out drunk. There were no signs of a struggle, yet the bruises on her body raised suspicions. Some believed she was forced into the garage and locked inside, left to suffocate. Others suspected she had been murdered elsewhere, and the scene was staged. Despite the inconsistencies, the case was closed. No one was ever charged. James Dean. The autopsy proved no instant death. He wasn't just a Hollywood actor. He was an icon of rebellion, speed, and recklessness. But on September 30th, 1955, the ride ended when his Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed the Little Bastard, collided with another vehicle at the intersection of Route 466, now State Route 46, and Route 41 in Cholame, California. The official cause of death: multiple traumatic injuries. The autopsy told a far grimmer story. Dean was behind the wheel, his passenger and mechanic, Rolf Wutherich, in the seat next to him. A Ford Tudor, driven by 23-year-old Donald Turnipseed, turned in front of them. Dean, going roughly 85 miles per hour, had no time to react. The impact crushed the tiny Porsche, hurling Dean's body halfway out of the wreckage. The autopsy report detailed the extensive damage: a fractured skull, broken neck, crushed ribs, and massive internal injuries. His left foot was nearly severed, but the most unsettling detail: he wasn't immediately dead. Witnesses, including a passing nurse, reported that he still had a faint pulse when first responders arrived. The coroner later confirmed that Dean likely suffered for a brief period before succumbing to internal hemorrhaging caused by a ruptured aorta. Wüthrich, meanwhile, was thrown from the car and survived, only to live with severe injuries and PTSD for the rest of his life. Dean's death certificate listed his time of death as 5:59 p.m. His body was so badly mangled that the funeral required a closed casket. Marilyn Monroe, the overdose. Official cause of death confirmed a lethal dose of barbiturates, Nembutal and chloral hydrate. But here's the thing: her stomach was empty. No traces of capsule residue, no sign of her swallowing over 40 pills. Just a body, face down, bruised, and a housekeeper who changed her story multiple times. The timeline was a mess. Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, reportedly broke into her room at 3:30 a.m. and found her dead. But early accounts said she was still alive when paramedics arrived. And her housekeeper? Eunice Murray, the last person to see Monroe alive, initially claimed she checked on her around midnight and found nothing unusual. Then, in a later interview, she slipped up saying, "Oh, why do I have to keep covering this up?" Then there were the missing phone records. Monroe was reportedly on the phone for hours that night. One call to actor Peter Lawford, who later said she sounded drugged and kept repeating, "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to Jack, Jack," as in John F. Kennedy. Those records vanished. And let's talk about her organs, because they also disappeared. Standard autopsy procedure required tissue samples to be sent to labs for further analysis. But her vital organs, including the stomach, never returned. Without them, it was impossible to determine if the drugs were ingested or introduced another way, which brings us to the most unsettling detail. Toxicology confirmed a fatal dose of barbiturates, but there was no water in her stomach, making it unlikely she swallowed dozens of pills. No needle marks were recorded on her body, dismissing the injection theory. But her colon showed signs of irritation, leading some experts to believe the drugs were administered via enema. It was a known practice for fast absorption, especially in cases where a person was too sedated to swallow. And if she didn't administer it herself? Well, that's the question no one could or would answer. Natalie Wood, the drowning. November 29, 1981. The body of Natalie Wood was pulled from the waters off Catalina Island. She was found wearing a red down jacket, a flannel nightgown, and socks, an unusual outfit for someone who had supposedly gone for a late-night boat ride. The official cause of death: accidental drowning. But nothing about the scene made sense. The autopsy revealed fresh bruises on her arms, wrists, and legs, signs she had either fallen, been restrained, or struggled before entering the water. The report noted a small scrape on her left cheek and superficial injuries on her body, though none were classified as defensive wounds. Alcohol and painkillers were in her system, but not at overdose levels. The coroner initially ruled that she had likely slipped, fallen overboard, and drowned. Case closed. Except there were glaring inconsistencies. For one, Robert Wagner, her husband, waited hours before alerting authorities. Official reports say she had been missing since around midnight, yet the Coast Guard wasn't called until 1:30 a.m. The only other people on board Splendor that night? Christopher Walken and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. Walken never publicly spoke about what happened. Davern, on the other hand, later admitted they had all been drinking heavily and that an argument had erupted before Wood somehow ended up in the water. Witnesses on nearby boats reported hearing a woman screaming for help that night, but no distress calls were made from Splendor. Wagner later admitted in his memoir that he and Wood had been fighting, but denied any involvement in her death. Yet, when Davern changed his story years later, claiming Wagner was responsible, the case was reopened in 2011. The cause of death was amended to drowning and other undetermined factors, citing the unexplained bruises and new witness statements. Wagner was eventually named a person of interest, but with no concrete evidence, no charges were filed. The mystery remains unresolved. How did Natalie Wood end up in the water? And why did it take so long to ask the right questions? Judy Garland, The Final Autopsy. Judy Garland's death certificate listed accidental barbiturate overdose. But the real horror wasn't just how she died. It was what led to it. When she was found in her London home on June 22, 1969, the scene was eerily calm. No distress, no final note, just the quiet end of a woman who had spent her life running on empty. The autopsy told the full story. Garland weighed only 90 pounds. Her body showed signs of severe malnutrition. Her liver was deteriorating, and her stomach was completely empty, meaning she hadn't eaten for some time before her death. The official cause, an accidental overdose of Seconal, a barbiturate she had relied on for years. Unlike Marilyn Monroe's case, there was no question of foul play, no suspicious bruises, no missing toxicology reports, just a tragic but predictable outcome. She had been prescribed barbiturates for decades, first by MGM studio doctors to keep her performing, then by personal physicians who likely meant well but contributed to her growing dependence. This wasn't a sudden overdose. It was a slow, decades-long breakdown. The same Hollywood machine that made her a star had systematically worn her down. Studio execs had put her on diet pills at 16, forced her through grueling filming schedules with uppers to keep her awake and downers to put her to sleep, and by the time she was an adult, her body no longer functioned without them. In the last years of her life, she was physically and financially exhausted. She had lost her home, struggled through multiple marriages, and relied on live performances just to survive. A 1968 interview showed her hands trembling as she tried to explain why she kept going. "I have to work. It's the only thing I know." The coroner ruled her death accidental, but that word barely scratches the surface. Judy Garland was worked to death before she ever stopped breathing. Bob Crane, The Bludgeoning. The charismatic star of Hogan's Heroes, Bob Crane, was found brutally murdered in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment on June 29, 1978. His death certificate listed the cause in stark clinical terms: homicide by blunt instrument. That barely scratched the surface of what police walked into. The crime scene was grisly. Crane was discovered in his bed, his skull shattered by multiple blows to the head. Blood spatter coated the walls and ceiling, and investigators determined the murder weapon was likely a heavy-duty camera tripod. His injuries were devastating: severe head trauma, deep lacerations, and massive hemorrhaging. The force of the blows suggested rage, not just an attempt to kill but to destroy. Then there was the electrical cord. It was wrapped around his neck, but there was no clear forensic evidence proving whether it was used to strangle him or simply placed there after death. The Scottsdale police were immediately suspicious. This wasn't a random attack, it was personal. Crane's complicated personal life only deepened the mystery. He had a well-documented habit of filming explicit tapes with various women, often alongside his closest friend, John Carpenter, not the director. Carpenter, a video equipment salesman, frequently supplied Crane with cameras and editing tools, making him more than just a bystander in Crane's secret lifestyle. And conveniently, he was one of the last people to see Crane alive. Police quickly zeroed in on Carpenter as the prime suspect. His rental car was searched, and inside, they found traces of blood that matched Crane's blood type. But this was 1978. DNA testing wasn't where it is today. Blood type evidence wasn't enough for a conviction. Without a direct forensic link, the case stalled. Years later, in 1992, Carpenter was charged with Crane's murder, when new technology allowed for DNA retesting. But the results were inconclusive, and he was acquitted. To this day, Bob Crane's murder remains officially unsolved. Sharon Tate, the gruesome reality. August 9, 1969. Sharon Tate's body was discovered inside the home she shared with her husband, director Roman Polanski, in Benedict Canyon. The address, 10,050 Cello Drive, would forever be tied to one of the most horrific crimes in Hollywood history. But beyond the newspaper headlines and the chilling Manson family mythology, her autopsy revealed a reality even more brutal than the world initially knew. The official cause of death: multiple stab wounds. The coroner's report, however, exposed a level of savagery that defied logic. Tate, 8 months pregnant, was stabbed 16 times, with 5 wounds considered fatal. Despite her pregnancy, she showed clear signs of trying to defend herself. Cuts and slashes on her arms and hands indicated she had fought back. Blood spatter evidence suggested she was still alive during most of the attack, enduring unimaginable pain as her killers carried out Charles Manson's twisted orders. The crime scene itself horrified even the most seasoned investigators. The walls were smeared with blood, with the word "pig" scrawled in Tate's own blood on the front door. A thick white rope was looped around her neck and tied to a ceiling beam, connecting her to the body of Jay Sebring, a celebrity hairstylist and her close friend, who had been killed before her. Tate's final moments were pure terror, pleading for the life of her unborn child before Watson and Krenwinkel struck the final blows. The autopsy put to rest several grisly rumors. There was no post-mortem mutilation. Her unborn child, a boy who would have been named Paul Richard Polanski, remained inside her. The infamous whispers that the baby had been cut from her body were entirely false. When the report was released, it further solidified the sheer brutality of the Manson family's crime spree. Her autopsy was the final word on a crime so horrific that it remains burned into public memory more than 50 years later. Behind the red carpet lies a darker side of fame. Hollywood icons revered by millions, caught in the most jaw-dropping drunken scandals. From Errol Flynn's wild escapades to Robert Downey Jr.'s struggles, uncover the secrets the stars tried to hide. This is the real Hollywood. Errol Flynn's Wild Nights, 1940s. An iconic actor of the 1940s known for his swashbuckling roles in films like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood, Errol Flynn was infamous for his off-screen antics. Flynn's penchant for heavy drinking and partying led to numerous scandals. One of the most notorious incidents occurred in 1942 when he was arrested for statutory rape involving 2 underage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterlee. Although he was acquitted, the trial brought his wild lifestyle into the spotlight. Flynn's behavior was a staple of Hollywood gossip columns. He was often seen at bars and nightclubs, drinking excessively and getting into brawls. His favorite haunts included the famed Trocadero on the Sunset Strip and the Macambo nightclub, where he would often be found in the company of fellow actors and high-profile socialites. Flynn's notorious parties at his Mulholland Drive estate, nicknamed Cirrhosis by the Sea, were legendary for their debauchery, attracting Hollywood's elite and often ending in chaos. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, detailed many of these exploits, cementing his reputation as one of Hollywood's original bad boys. The book provides a vivid account of his hedonistic lifestyle, including tales of drunken escapades and romantic entanglements. Flynn once reportedly quipped, "I like my whiskey old and my women young," a line that epitomized his carefree and often reckless approach to life. Despite his personal life, Flynn continued to have a successful career. He starred in several notable films during the 1940s, including They Died with Their Boots On and Gentleman Jim. Spencer Tracy's Struggles with Alcohol, 1950s. One of Hollywood's most respected actors, Spencer Tracy battled alcoholism for much of his life. Known for his roles in classics like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Inherit the Wind, Tracy's drinking often affected his work. In the 1950s, his struggle became more apparent, with multiple incidents of public intoxication. One particularly notable event occurred in 1953, when Tracy was found passed out in the lobby of the Beverly Hills Hotel after a night of heavy drinking. His drinking affected his health and led to several hospitalizations. He often experienced severe hangovers and dehydration, requiring medical attention. Tracy's longtime companion, Katharine Hepburn, frequently stepped in to support him, even going so far as to monitor his drinking and assist him in his recovery efforts. Despite his struggles, Tracy's talent remained undeniable. He continued to deliver powerful performances in films such as Bad Day at Black Rock and The Old Man and the Sea. His ability to convey deep emotion and complexity in his characters made him a beloved figure in Hollywood. Directors admired his professionalism on set, even though they were aware of his battles with alcohol. Tracy's alcoholism strained his relationships with colleagues and affected his physical appearance. His once robust frame became increasingly frail, and his face showed the signs of heavy drinking. Yet, his performances never wavered in their intensity and brilliance. Hepburn once said of Tracy, "He was a drunk, but he was my drunk," highlighting her unwavering support and love for him despite his addiction. His addiction also took a toll on his family life. Tracy was separated from his wife Louise, although they never divorced, largely due to his Catholic faith. His children, John and Susie, were deeply affected by his alcoholism and the instability it brought to their lives. Judy Garland's troubled life, 1960s. The beloved star of The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland had a tumultuous life marked by substance abuse. In the 1960s, her struggles with alcohol and prescription drugs became more pronounced. Garland's dependence on substances led to erratic behavior and numerous incidents of public intoxication. In 1964, Garland was found intoxicated and disoriented in a London hotel. She had to cancel several performances due to her condition. Her addiction issues were further exacerbated by the pressures of constant touring and financial difficulties. Despite attempts to rehabilitate her image, her addictions continued to plague her. Garland's manager, Stevie Phillips, described her as being so drunk she couldn't stand, highlighting the severity of her condition. Her substance abuse and deteriorating health made it difficult for her to secure stable work in the industry. Her once radiant voice and commanding stage presence were often overshadowed by her personal struggles. Nevertheless, Garland managed to deliver a few notable performances during this period, including a memorable concert at Carnegie Hall in 1961, which became a best-selling album and earned her a Grammy. Garland's relationships also suffered due to her addictions. She went through multiple marriages and divorces, each contributing to her emotional instability. Her children, including Liza Minnelli, often witnessed her struggles, adding a layer of familial tension to her already chaotic life. Garland's attempts at sobriety were frequent, but often short-lived, as the demands of her career and personal life repeatedly drove her back to substance use. Dean Martin's party persona, 1950s to 1970s. A member of the famous Rat Pack, Dean Martin was known for his smooth voice and charming on-screen presence. Off-screen, Martin cultivated a persona of the perpetual partygoer, often seen with a drink in hand. While some of his drinking was part of his act, Martin did have a penchant for alcohol. Throughout the 1950s to the 1970s, Martin's love for drinking was well documented. He often appeared on stage and television seemingly inebriated, playing into his laid-back, fun-loving image. His performances on The Dean Martin Show and the Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts featured him frequently sipping what appeared to be alcoholic beverages, adding to his carefree persona. This image was so convincing that many believed he was always under the influence, even though much of it was for show. Martin's association with the Rat Pack, alongside Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and others, only solidified his reputation as a hard-drinking entertainer. Their performances in Las Vegas were legendary for their humor, music, and revelry, with Martin often playing the role of the amiable drunk. Despite his heavy drinking, Martin maintained a successful career in music, film, and television. He starred in a series of popular films, including Some Came Running and Rio Bravo, and recorded numerous hit songs like Everybody Loves Somebody and Ain't That a Kick in the Head. Behind the scenes, Martin's drinking did have its limits. His daughter, Dina Martin, once said, "He liked to drink, but he knew his limits," suggesting that his on-stage persona was partly an act. In reality, Martin was known to switch his whiskey glass for apple juice during performances to maintain his composure while still entertaining the crowd. Marlon Brando's off-screen drama, 1950s to 1970s. Celebrated for his roles in A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather, Marlon Brando was known for his unpredictable behavior and off-screen drama. In the 1950s, Brando's temperamental nature and disdain for Hollywood norms led to clashes with directors and producers. His personal life was equally chaotic, with numerous affairs and a penchant for excess. By the 1970s, Brando's behavior became even more erratic, with reports of heavy drinking and weight gain affecting his performances. Despite these issues, his talent kept him in demand, although his career was marked by these tumultuous periods. One of Brando's most infamous episodes occurred in 1953 during the filming of The Wild One. Known for his method acting, Brando immersed himself fully into the rebellious character he portrayed. Off-screen, he continued this behavior, frequently getting into altercations and showing up drunk on set. His clashes with director Laszlo Benedek and other crew members became legendary, further cementing his reputation as difficult but brilliant. In the 1960s, Brando's heavy drinking became more public. While filming Mutiny on the Bounty in Tahiti in 1962, his off-screen antics caused significant delays and budget overruns. He would often disappear for days, indulging in alcohol-fueled parties that disrupted the production. His unpredictable behavior led to frequent arguments with the film's director, Louis Milestone, and the studio, which struggled to keep the project on track. By the 1970s, Brando's erratic behavior and physical decline were evident. His performance in The Godfather was critically acclaimed, yet behind the scenes, his unpredictable actions and excessive drinking caused tension. His weight gain and lack of discipline were issues that directors had to navigate delicately. On the set of Last Tango in Paris, director Bernardo Bertolucci had to manage Brando's erratic schedule and moods, often exacerbated by his drinking. Elizabeth Taylor's tumultuous love life, 1950s to 1970s. Known for her roles in Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Elizabeth Taylor was as famous for her tumultuous personal life as she was for her acting. Throughout the 1950s to the 1970s, Taylor's numerous marriages and publicized affairs made headlines. Her relationship with Richard Burton, fueled by passion and alcohol, was particularly notable. The two married and divorced twice, with their fiery relationship often playing out in the public eye. Taylor's struggles with substance abuse, including alcohol and prescription drugs, further complicated her personal life and career. One of the most infamous incidents highlighting Taylor's issues with alcohol occurred during the filming of Cleopatra in the early 1960s. Taylor and Burton's on-set affair, fueled by their heavy drinking, became a public scandal. The media frenzy surrounding their relationship overshadowed the film itself. Paparazzi frequently captured the couple leaving bars and nightclubs in a drunken stupor, fueling tabloid stories and public fascination with their tumultuous romance. Another notable episode happened in 1974 when Taylor and Burton were dining at the Dorchester Hotel in London. Both had been drinking heavily, and a heated argument ensued which quickly escalated into a loud and public confrontation. The incident ended with Taylor throwing a glass of wine in Burton's face. Such public displays of their volatile relationship, often exacerbated by alcohol, became a regular spectacle for the press, and further cemented their reputations as Hollywood's most tempestuous couple. Peter O'Toole's legendary drinking, 1960s. Peter O'Toole, known for his iconic role in Lawrence of Arabia, was famous for his heavy drinking throughout the 1960s. His off-screen escapades were as legendary as his performances. One night in 1963, O'Toole and fellow actor Richard Harris reportedly drank their way through several London pubs, ending in a drunken brawl that required police intervention. O'Toole himself recounted in an interview, "I did quite enjoy the taste of alcohol a lot, and there were nights when I would drink a bar dry." His drinking was so notorious that in one incident he was found passed out in a public fountain in Rome. This wild lifestyle often led to outrageous antics that became the stuff of Hollywood legend, like the time he supposedly rode a camel through the streets of Dublin after a night of heavy drinking. Despite his wild behavior, O'Toole's talent kept him in high demand. Directors and producers were willing to overlook his off-screen antics because of his exceptional acting abilities. He delivered powerful performances in films such as Beckett and The Lion in Winter, earning him critical acclaim and several Academy Award nominations. However, his drinking began to take a toll on his health and reputation. He was known to show up on set late or inebriated, causing frustration among his colleagues. O'Toole's drinking also led to numerous health issues. He underwent surgery in the late 1970s for pancreatitis, a condition exacerbated by his excessive alcohol consumption. His doctors warned him that he had to stop drinking if he wanted to live, which prompted him to significantly reduce his alcohol intake. Despite these challenges, O'Toole continued to act, delivering memorable performances well into his later years. Richard Burton's Public Drunkenness, 1970s. Another star of the 1960s and 70s, Richard Burton was infamous for his public bouts of drunkenness. Known for his turbulent relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, their fights were often fueled by alcohol. In 1974, during a visit to London, Burton was seen staggering out of a bar, barely able to walk. One notable incident occurred in 1975 when Burton was ejected from a theater after causing a scene during a performance. According to witnesses, he was shouting incoherently and had to be physically removed. The media had a field day, and the story was splashed across headlines. This public humiliation highlighted the extent of his alcohol dependency and its impact on his public image. Burton's drinking habits were well documented and became part of his public persona. He was often seen with a drink in hand at social events, parties, and even on film sets. His penchant for alcohol not only strained his relationships but also affected his professional life. Directors and co-stars often had to contend with his unpredictable behavior and frequent absences due to his drinking binges. Despite these incidents, Burton continued to work, though his excessive drinking affected his performances and health. His once powerful voice and commanding presence began to wane, and his roles became less frequent and less prominent. He starred in several notable films during this period, including The Exorcist II, The Heretic, and Equus, but his performances were often overshadowed by his off-screen antics. Burton's health deteriorated significantly due to his drinking. He suffered from liver cirrhosis and other alcohol-related illnesses, leading to multiple hospitalizations. Despite the toll on his body, Burton seemed resigned to his fate. He once said, "I was drunk for years. I was happy drunk," reflecting a sense of acceptance and perhaps denial of the severe consequences of his lifestyle. John Belushi's Party Lifestyle, 1980s. The beloved star of Animal House and the Blues Brothers, John Belushi had a reputation for hard partying that ultimately led to his tragic end. In the early 1980s, Belushi's drug and alcohol use was spiraling out of control. Known for his larger-than-life personality, Belushi often indulged in wild parties, which were infamous for their excess and debauchery. Belushi's reckless lifestyle came to a devastating halt in March 1982 when he was found dead in his bungalow at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles. The coroner's report revealed a lethal combination of cocaine and heroin, often referred to as a speedball. His sudden death at the age of 33 shocked the entertainment world and highlighted the dangers of Hollywood's party lifestyle. Belushi's struggle with substance abuse was well known among his friends and colleagues. Efforts were made to help him curb his addictions, but his escalating use of drugs and alcohol made it increasingly difficult. Mickey Rourke's downward spiral, late 1980s. A rising star in the 1980s with films like 9½ Weeks and Angel Heart, Mickey Rourke saw his career nosedive due to his off-screen behavior. In 1989, Rourke was arrested for public intoxication after a bar fight in Los Angeles. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with Rourke shouting and throwing punches. This incident was just one of many that highlighted his turbulent lifestyle. Rourke's behavior led to a reputation as a difficult and unreliable actor. Directors were hesitant to work with him, and his career suffered as a result. His erratic actions on set and frequent altercations with co-stars further tarnished his professional image. Rourke later admitted in interviews that his drinking and aggressive behavior were a form of self-destruction. "I was on a path of destruction, and alcohol was my fuel," he said. The late 1980s and 1990s were marked by a series of personal and professional setbacks for Rourke. His marriage to actress Deborah Fewer ended in divorce, and his subsequent relationships were equally tumultuous. His struggles with alcohol and substance abuse continued, leading to more arrests and a further decline in his career. The once promising actor found himself increasingly marginalized in Hollywood, with fewer roles being offered. Rourke's passion for boxing, which he had pursued before becoming an actor, resurfaced during this period. He returned to the ring in the early 1990s, hoping to escape his troubled acting career and personal demons. Although he achieved some success as a boxer, the sport took a physical toll on his body and further isolated him from the film industry. It wasn't until the 2000s that Rourke began to turn his life around. He sought therapy and gradually reduced his alcohol consumption. His comeback role in The Wrestler, 2008, marked a significant turning point, earning him critical acclaim and a Golden Globe Award. Despite his redemption arc, the damage to his career from his earlier behavior was significant and took years to repair. Robert Downey Jr. struggles, 1990. In the early 90s, Robert Downey Jr. was known for his incredible talent and growing career. However, his substance abuse issues became public knowledge in 1996 when he was arrested in Malibu. Found under the influence of drugs, he was driving erratically and speeding down Sunset Boulevard. Police found heroin, cocaine, and a .357 Magnum revolver in his car. Downey's arrest shocked the entertainment industry and his fans. His talent had been widely recognized, and he had been on a promising career trajectory with roles in films like Less Than Zero and Chaplin, for which he received an Academy Award nomination. The incident in Malibu, however, marked the beginning of a very public struggle with addiction. Downey later said in a court hearing, "It's like I have a shotgun in my mouth, and I've got my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of gunmetal," poignantly describing the grip addiction had on him. Despite repeated attempts at rehabilitation, his struggle with addiction continued. Between 1996 and 2001, Downey was arrested several times, each incident marking a significant low in his career. His arrests included a 1997 incident where he was found passed out. Some of the old-time Hollywood celebrities were into stuff you wouldn't believe, from having weird obsessions with scat
It is Austin.
to something as bizarre as an irrational fear for the color purple. There is no denying the fact that most of what you're about to be exposed to make absolutely no sense. Charles Laughton's weird diet. In his memoir, Full Service, My Adventures in Hollywood and the Sex Lives of the Stars, Scotty Bowers claims to have either slept with or arranged sexual liaisons for hundreds of the best-known celebrities during Hollywood's golden age. One of the most shocking stories involves British actor Charles Laughton. But that's not all. According to Bowers, Laughton once asked him to bring over a young male guest while his wife was out. When Bowers and the young man arrived, Laughton began making a sandwich. He carefully sliced up lettuce and tomatoes, arranged them on sourdough bread, added a bit of lemon juice, and sprinkled some salt and pepper. This is where it gets interesting. After a few minutes of prep work, Laughton took the bread slices in one hand, picked up a pot with the other, and asked the young man to follow him into the bathroom. But what happened next will shock you. Here's what Bowers describes. Charles was the first to return. He put the plate with the bread slices on the kitchen table. I could see that the lettuce and tomatoes had been lightly smeared with a light brown substance. Seconds later, Ted appeared in the kitchen. His erection was gone, and he was looking decidedly sheepish, perhaps even a trifle embarrassed. I stared at him curiously, and he pulled a face, hoping that Charles wouldn't notice. He pointed at the bread slices on the plate and then lightly patted his backside. And then, believe it or not, Laughton ate the sandwich. Ronald Reagan's obsession with young virgins. Ronald Reagan is often remembered more for his political career than his time in Hollywood, but back in the 1940s and 50s he was one of Tinseltown's leading men. But that's not all. One of the most cringe-inducing rumors about Reagan's Hollywood days comes from his co-star in the 1950 drama Louisa, Piper Laurie. She claims that the future GOP icon took her virginity when he was 39 years old, and she was just 18. But what happened next will shock you. In her memoir, Laurie writes that Reagan first seduced her on the set of their film Louisa, where he played her father. At first, Reagan seemed like a true gentleman. He even asked Laurie's mother for permission to take her on a date. Sounds charming, right? But instead of the glamorous evening Laurie had imagined, Reagan took both her and her mother to his house, where he cooked hamburger steak and salad. This is where it gets interesting. After dinner, things took a strange turn. Reagan led Laurie back to the bedroom. According to her, the actor was an insensitive show-off in bed. He bragged about how long he'd been erect, 40 whole minutes, and how much his condom had cost. But that's not all. Laurie also recounts that Reagan was far from a considerate lover. Not only did he fail to pleasure her, but when she mentioned her lack of an orgasm, his response was harsh and critical. According to her, he said, "There's something wrong with you that you should fix." Howard Hughes's extreme obsession with hygiene. Howard Hughes, the brilliant yet enigmatic tycoon, had a mind that worked in extraordinary ways. His achievements in aviation, film, and business were nothing short of legendary. But alongside his brilliance, there was a peculiar and relentless obsession that dominated his life: cleanliness. Imagine a man so consumed by the fear of germs that he would lock himself away in dark rooms for days, sometimes even weeks. Hughes turned his lavish homes into fortresses of solitude, meticulously sealed to keep out any potential contamination. The windows were often covered, creating a gloomy, almost eerie atmosphere, as if he were living in a perpetual twilight. Hughes's hand-washing routine was nothing short of ritualistic. Picture this. He would wash his hands repeatedly, scrubbing them until they were raw and sometimes even bleeding. It wasn't just a quick rinse, it was a painstaking process, as if he were trying to scrub away invisible threats. His fear of germs was so intense that he believed even the slightest contact could lead to illness or infection. But Hughes's obsession didn't stop at hand-washing. He went to extraordinary lengths to avoid human contact altogether. For instance, if he had to meet someone, he would often communicate through notes or intercom systems, avoiding face-to-face interactions. He would use tissues to touch objects and had a meticulous system for handling everyday items to ensure they remained uncontaminated. Hughes's peculiarities extended to his instructions to staff and associates. He once demanded that all canned food be meticulously washed and scrubbed before opening. Imagine the bewilderment of his staff as they followed these bizarre instructions, knowing that any deviation could trigger one of Hughes's infamous outbursts. Even when he was flying, Hughes couldn't escape his fears. His custom-built planes were designed with his germophobia in mind. He often flew alone or with minimal crew, ensuring that the aircraft remained as sterile as possible. The irony of an aviation pioneer afraid of the very air he conquered is striking, isn't it? Hughes's obsession with cleanliness and germs was a constant battle in his mind. Despite his towering intellect and achievements, he was trapped by his own fears. This relentless battle between his rational, inventive side and his irrational, obsessive side created a fascinating yet tragic figure. The man who soared to great heights in both the literal and metaphorical sense was, in many ways, grounded by his own mind. Mae West's astrology obsession. Mae West, a name synonymous with boldness and wit, was a star who dazzled both on and off the screen. But behind her larger-than-life persona and sultry quips lay a fascination that guided many of her choices: astrology. Mae West was deeply obsessed with astrology. This wasn't just a casual interest or a passing fancy, it was a central pillar of her decision-making process. Imagine a woman who, despite her confidence and unshakable self-assuredness, would not make any major life decisions without first consulting her astrologer. Whether it was a career move, a personal relationship, or even the timing of her day-to-day activities, the stars had to align for Mae. Her belief in astrology was so profound that it influenced her creative work. She wrote a play called The Constant Sinner, which was steeped in astrological themes. The narrative wasn't just a backdrop for her characters. It was interwoven with the celestial movements and zodiac signs that Mae believed so deeply in. This wasn't just art imitating life. It was life, love, and destiny dictated by the cosmos. Think about the confidence and assertiveness Mae West exuded in every role she played and every public appearance she made. Now imagine that same woman, with all her bravado, quietly consulting her astrologer in private, seeking guidance from the alignment of planets and stars. It's a striking contrast, isn't it? The idea that such a powerful figure would defer to celestial charts and predictions adds a fascinating layer to her already complex persona. Astrology wasn't just a hobby for Mae West, it was a way of life. She saw the patterns and signs as a roadmap, helping her navigate the tumultuous landscape of Hollywood and her personal life. This deep-rooted belief in the stars provided her with a sense of control and direction, a way to make sense of the often unpredictable nature of fame and fortune. Marlene Dietrich and collecting men's clothes. Beyond her screen persona, Marlene had an intriguing obsession that set her apart from her contemporaries, a fascination with men's clothing. This wasn't just a passing fancy or a quirky interest. It was a profound passion that influenced both her personal life and her public image. Dietrich didn't merely collect men's clothing, she wore it with a sense of ease and confidence that challenged the norms of her time. In an era when women were expected to adhere to strict fashion conventions, Dietrich's choice to don suits, trousers, and tailored shirts was nothing short of revolutionary. Picture her walking into a Hollywood event in a perfectly fitted tuxedo, her hair meticulously styled, and her makeup flawless. The image was striking and unforgettable, making a powerful statement about gender and fashion. She was one of the first women to popularize androgynous fashion in Hollywood. Her style wasn't about rejecting femininity, but about embracing a broader spectrum of identity. By wearing men's clothing, Dietrich played with societal expectations, blending masculinity and femininity in a way that was both provocative and liberating. She made it clear that clothing was an expression of self, not a strict adherence to gender norms. Dietrich's fascination with men's clothing went beyond the surface. She appreciated the craftsmanship, the structure, and the way these garments allowed her to move and present herself. Collecting these pieces became a hobby, a form of self-expression, and a way to assert her individuality. Imagine her private wardrobe, filled with an array of perfectly tailored suits, each piece carefully chosen and cherished. Her influence extended far beyond her personal collection. Dietrich's androgynous style inspired countless designers and fashion enthusiasts, paving the way for future generations to explore and embrace non-traditional fashion choices. She wasn't just a style icon. She was a pioneer who challenged the fashion industry's rigid boundaries. Peter Sellers' obsession against the color purple. Most people have typical fears like heights, snakes, or spiders, but Peter Sellers, he had a bizarre terror of the color purple. Now, Sellers' eccentricity wasn't the lovable, bumbling kind he often portrayed in his roles. It was far more chaotic and disturbing, making him a difficult person to be around. On film sets, Sellers was infamous for his explosive outbursts. Imagine him in a fit of rage, yelling at his wives, smashing dishes, and even brandishing a shotgun to vent his anger. His tantrums didn't stop there. He clashed with directors and producers, despite their higher status, and would often get lower-level staff fired if they crossed him. His erratic behavior was compounded by his vague racism and intense superstitions. One superstition in particular involved the famed director Vittorio De Sica. While they were working on After the Fox, Sellers saw De Sica berate a script girl for wearing purple. The director ominously declared that purple was the color of death. This statement profoundly impacted Sellers, who became convinced that the color purple could kill. From then on, Sellers' fear of purple dominated his actions. Any time he encountered the color, he'd fly into a panic, throwing tantrums and insisting it be removed. This irrational fear added yet another layer of unpredictability to an already volatile personality, making life around him a constant challenge. Charlie Chaplin's obsession with younger women. Charlie Chaplin, the legendary actor, filmmaker, and comedian, known for his iconic character, the Little Tramp, also had a much darker side to his personal life. Beyond the silver screen, Chaplin's relationships were the subject of much controversy, largely due to his well-known obsession with very young women. This fixation shaped his personal and professional life in ways that continue to spark debate. Chaplin's first marriage was to Mildred Harris in 1918, when he was 29 and she was just 16. Their relationship began when Harris was only 15, highlighting the significant age difference and Chaplin's preference for much younger partners. The marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years, but it set a precedent for Chaplin's future romantic endeavors. Following his divorce from Harris, Chaplin embarked on a series of relationships with teenage girls. His second marriage was to Leda Gray, who was 16 when they started their relationship and 18 when they married in 1924. Chaplin was 35 at the time. Their union was fraught with difficulties from the start. Gray's youth and inexperience clashed with Chaplin's controlling nature, leading to a tumultuous relationship that ended in a highly publicized and acrimonious divorce. The divorce proceedings revealed many sordid details about Chaplin's behavior, further cementing his controversial reputation. Despite the scandal, Chaplin continued to pursue young women. His third marriage was to Paulette Goddard, a rising star in Hollywood, who was 21 when they met, and Chaplin was 47. Though their marriage was kept relatively private and the age gap was not as stark as in his previous relationships, the pattern of significant age differences persisted. Chaplin's fourth and final marriage was to Una O'Neill, the daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill. Una was just 18 when she married Chaplin, who was 54 at the time. This marriage, despite the age gap, proved to be the most stable and enduring of Chaplin's life. They remained together until Chaplin's death in 1977, and they had 8 children. Una's unwavering support and devotion seemed to bring Chaplin a semblance of the stability that had eluded him in his previous relationships. His preference for young women was not limited to his marriages. He was known to have numerous relationships with teenage girls throughout his life, often starting when the girls were still minors. This behavior, while not uncommon in the early 20th century, drew significant criticism and legal challenges. In one notable case, Chaplin faced a paternity suit from actress Joan Barry, who was 23 years younger than him. The case, which included allegations of coercion and manipulation, was widely covered by the media and further tarnished Chaplin's public image. The controversy surrounding Chaplin's relationships with young women has led to a complex legacy. On one hand, he is celebrated as a genius of early cinema, whose contributions to film and comedy are unparalleled. On the other hand, his personal life raises uncomfortable questions about the dynamics of power and exploitation. Chaplin's behavior reflects the broader societal attitudes of his time, where older men often pursued younger women, sometimes with dire consequences. Gloria Swanson's obsession with health and fasting. Gloria Swanson, one of Hollywood's most glamorous and enduring stars, was not only known for her striking beauty and acting prowess, but also for her intense dedication to health foods and fasting. Decades before the wellness industry became mainstream, Swanson was a pioneer in the realm of health and nutrition, turning her lifestyle into a fervent obsession that shaped her daily routines and public persona. Swanson's journey into the world of health foods and fasting began at a time when processed foods were becoming increasingly popular in America. Rejecting this trend, she delved into natural and organic eating habits, believing that what she consumed had a direct impact on her overall well-being and longevity. Her approach to diet was meticulous and uncompromising. She scrutinized every ingredient, ensuring that her meals were not only nutritious but also free from any artificial additives or preservatives. Her commitment to healthy foods extended beyond just eating organic produce. Swanson embraced a diet rich in raw vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, long before such dietary choices became fashionable. She was particularly fond of juicing, often preparing fresh vegetable and fruit juices to maintain her energy and vitality. This dedication to a clean diet was not merely a fad for Swanson. It was a deeply ingrained lifestyle choice that she believed was essential for sustaining her health and beauty. In addition to her strict dietary habits, Swanson was a firm believer in the benefits of fasting. She would often embark on long fasts, abstaining from food for extended periods to cleanse her body and mind. These fasts were not just about physical health. Swanson saw them as a way to achieve mental clarity and spiritual renewal. Her fasting routines were rigorous, sometimes lasting several days, during which she would consume only water or freshly squeezed juices. This practice was unconventional and even controversial at the time, but Swanson was unwavering in her belief in its benefits. Swanson's obsession with health foods and fasting was also evident in her social interactions and public appearances. She often spoke about her dietary practices, sharing her knowledge and experiences with others. She became an advocate for healthy living, encouraging those around her to adopt similar habits. Her influence extended to her close circle of friends and colleagues in Hollywood, many of whom were inspired by her dedication and began to explore healthier lifestyles themselves. Her commitment to health was not without its challenges. Swanson faced skepticism and criticism from those who viewed her practices as extreme or unnecessary. However, she remained steadfast, confident in the knowledge that her choices were beneficial. Her dedication to health and wellness was a testament to her discipline and determination, qualities that also defined her illustrious career. Swanson's approach to health was holistic. She believed in the interconnectedness of physical, mental, and emotional well-being. This belief guided her lifestyle choices, from her diet and fasting routines to her emphasis on regular exercise and stress management. She practiced yoga and meditation long before these practices became popular in the West, as part of her daily regimen to maintain balance and harmony in her life. Her obsession with health foods and fasting also influenced her work. Swanson often took on roles that reflected her personal beliefs, portraying characters who embodied strength, resilience, and a sense of well-being. Her off-screen persona, as a health-conscious and disciplined individual, became an integral part of her public image, distinguishing her from many of her contemporaries.
Giovanni Jackson, Daddy's Girl,